Kicking off the list at number 10, we have the Thousand, aka Carl King. The Thousand made a brief but memorable appearance in the comics, beginning with Spider-Man Tangled Web number 1 back in 2001. Carl's origin story is quite compelling, as he actually witnessed Peter Parker obtain his powers by being bitten by the radioactive spider. He's clearly upset and a tad jealous. The opening of the issue has him just staring out of a cafe window, just stewing in the fact that it should have been him instead of Peter Parker to get those powers, which, you know what, I understand, man. I say that every single time I watch a Marvel movie. So, making a terrifying entrance, he reveals himself as the Thousand. So instead of getting the same powers as Peter, he actually turned into 1,000 spiders. No, I don't like that. I feel sick looking at this guy. The last page of his first issue really pulls you in. It's his skin suit, like it's his skin as a suit, just chilling on a coat hook, while he takes over Miss Peyton, even revealing that he ate her from the inside out. He's a bunch of spiders that take over your body. No wonder we didn't hear much about this guy. Yuck. Next, get out of here. And before we move on with our list, guys, if you haven't already, please toss us a like down below. It's a big help to us here at our secret underground bunker. Thank you so much. Okay, back to these crazy villains. And coming in at number 9, we have the Spot. Making his first appearance in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 98, the Spot isn't exactly the coolest villain per se. I mean, he doesn't throw pumpkin bombs, he's not made of 1,000 spiders, but when Jonathan Owen was exposed to the spotted dimension during an experiment, his skin became white with black spots, and those spots acting as warps in space. Honestly, this character is super unique. In his second issue, you really see what he can do. He uses these portals to punch through space and hit his victims far away. He holds these portals like frisbees, and personally, I would love to see this guy fight Doctor Strange. The whole portal versus portal action alone would be mint. And they're both doctors. So why hasn't this happened yet? I don't know. Seeing Spider-Man use his portals to hit Thanos in Infinity War makes me think if the Spot was in a Spider-Man movie, it would be just hours of that. And honestly, that would be sweet. I'm here for it. I wish I was the Spot. Scratching your back would be so much easier. Instead of reaching and like trying to like pull your shoulders out, no thank you. Much better. Coming in at number 8, we have Swarm. Oh, you thought I was done with disgusting Swarm villains. No, think again. Fritz von Meyer made his debut in Champions issue 14 back in 1977. And as you can probably guess by his name, yes, he's made of a swarm of bees. Kind of like the Thousand, except somehow worse. He's also a scientist. So, for sure worse. Definitely worse. He used stolen gold to pay for all of his projects. So he's a Nazi beekeeper who steals gold. Great. You're a villain. You did it. So it's no surprise we haven't heard much about him. I mean, what a weird character. One day he found a beehive that was not like any other. So Fritz made a device that hoped would reawaken these bees, which he thought were like the end result of a mutation with a nearby fallen meteorite. The bees woke up, but then they continued to attack and kill Fritz, the beekeeper Fritz. No, not him. And then his consciousness was spread out through all of those bees, and now you have the Swarm. Literally the bee's knees. I don't care how tough you think you are, there's no chance you're going toe to toe with bees. There's no fight. If I was swinging around the city and a swarm of bees was robbing a bank, I didn't see that. I'm just gonna keep heading to Aunt May's. No worries. Headphones are going back in. Good luck. R.I.P. Good game. And coming in at number 7, we have Mindworm. In Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 138, we were introduced to William Turner. No, not that William Turner, although I'm sure he'd be great. He's probably fine. I'm talking about the telepathic, tragic, minor Spider-Man villain, Mindworm. Born with limited telepathic powers, he was the cause of his parents' untimely death, and he suffered from it for quite a while. So he grew up in an orphanage and protected himself from bullies using his mind powers, thus donning the nickname Mindworm. He's extremely smart. He even looks smart too, with his big giant brain head. He attacked Peter once by hijacking the minds of others to do the dirty work, so people just started attacking him randomly. What I like most about this villain is he tries not to be a villain, for the most part at least. He just feels this tremendous guilt after being born this way. I mean, it's not his fault. Number 6, Red Goblin. Green Goblin plus Carnage equals holy shit. Appearing in The Amazing Spider-Man 798, Norman Osborn stole the Carnage symbiote, and then after that, it was just a nightmare. So Norman used the symbiote to eject all of the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mash, becoming the Red Goblin. Put them both together, very scary. The rare weaknesses that the symbiotes do have went away once the two had merged, right? So if you think you can use sound or fire to take this guy out, it's your funeral, no way. Green Goblin was fine with those things, so now the Carnage side of Red Goblin isn't affected either. Even the bombs that he used are like these Carnage pumpkin bombs that will like bite you. It's all fused together and it's really intimidating. I'd love to see more of the Red Goblin, let's go. And number 5, Calypso. Making her first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 209, Calypso is a voodoo priestess who also happens to be the lover of Kraven the Hunter. After gaining her powers from sacrificing her own sister, it's safe to say she took the villain route. So what started out as her being the significant other to Kraven the Hunter soon turned into Calypso taking over the mind of the Lizard and using him. Not cool. You can see this take shape beginning in the Torment 5-part storyline. And with rumors of Kraven the Hunter being casted in the next Spider-Man flick, who knows, maybe we'll get a little sneak peek at Calypso as well. Fingers crossed. Number 4, the Red Vulture. Okay, so we talked earlier about the Red Goblin, so we might as well throw another big red in the mix while we're here. The Red Vulture made his comic book debut in Amazing Spider-Man issue 592, and while some may see the Vulture as Adrian Toomes, the Red Vulture is actually James Natal. So James started off working for the mob, of course, and then after the workload kept increasing and increasing, he requested some help. So his superiors figured it would be a great time to use him as his test subject to make a new super bad. Using the same technology that had created the Fly and the Scorpion, but with a little hint of, memory loss thrown in there, Spider-Man found this monstrosity during a patrol, and he saw him eating a guy. He has acid spit, so it's not too hard to eat a guy. Even Peter gets some acid in his eyes. I mean, where's an emergency eye wash station when you need it? And coming in at number 3, Carrion, aka Miles Warren, made his comic book debut back in Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man issue 25. His powers are pretty amazing. I mean, I would love to see more of this guy. Everything he touches turns to dust. It turns to dust, red dust. It's very bad. He's creepy looking. I mean, he also carries this little pouch side carry bag, so he looks creepy, but he also looks like he's running errands. So, I don't know. He's taking lives, but he's also late for work. He's a weird looking guy. The initial Carrion was actually a clone of the Jackal, but the virus had made it outlive that body. So now we're left with this. Super strength, telepathy, levitation, super speed. It's pretty hard to avoid the touch of Carrion, especially when he's motoring. This villain didn't last too long back in the late 70s, but he's interesting enough to check out. So go do that. And number 2, Morbius. We have to include Michael Morbius, the living vampire. I mean, after all, Jared Leto is set to take on the bloodthirsty mantle with a sneaky little peek at Michael Keaton's Vulture at the end of the Morbius trailer that we got earlier this awful year. A lot of people are wondering who this guy is now. Making his debut in Amazing Spider-Man 101, Michael Morbius was, of course, a scientist, and actually a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist. Having a debilitating blood disease plus experimenting with bats to find a solution, you already know what's about to go down. The best part of his origin story is that when he meets Spider-Man for the first time, this just happens to be the time where Spider-Man is donning the 4 extra arms, and it's pretty entertaining. So Morbius, in his thirst for blood, is like, oh, that dude's got 6 arms, that's like a lot of blood. Oh boy, that would be pretty yummy. So Morbius attacks and does a pretty decent job. In comes Curtis Connors to help out, or rather, turn into the Lizard and make Spider-Man's day go from bad to worse. I'm pretty pumped to see Jared Leto take flight with Morbius. I mean, I'm also pretty sure Jared Leto's already a vampire to begin with, so I'm sure his method acting will really come in handy. And closing off the list, coming in at number 1, we have Tombstone, a notable villain in the Spider-Man PS4 storyline, and making his debut in the late 80s in Web of Spider-Man 36. Tombstone, aka Lonnie Lincoln, grew up bullied due to his physicality. He was born albino and much taller and stronger than others, so naturally he himself also became a bully too. See how it works? Don't bully people. There's an idea. Down the road, he embraced it and became one of the biggest, baddest hitmen out there, taking out the trash for Kingpin himself. Weighing in at almost 500 pounds and towering at the height of 6'7", Lonnie is strong enough to lift 6 tons. So if you're a fan of the Spider-Man game, you'll agree he's one of the hardest villains in that entire storyline, and for good reason.
You got some stones, Rick. Let's see if they break.
Number 10, Mindworm. Mindworm, aka William Turner, but not the William Turner from Pirates of the Caribbean, is very powerful with his mind, allowing himself to read people's thoughts, drain people's energy, and create illusions. Mindworm has a very large head and brain that he was born with. At one time, he was neighbors to Flash Thompson and Peter Parker when he moved in with Flash. Since Mindworm was always feeding off people's minds, it was no surprise that he was trying to feed off of Peter's mind as well. But since Peter's so smart, he could fight off Mindworm's attack to his mind. This upset Mindworm, and he later fought Peter, but of course he was unsuccessful and lost. Mindworm used this as an opportunity to figure out why he was even doing this, and after taking a hard look at himself, and realizing that his anger was coming from what happened to his parents, he makes peace with Peter, and he even uses his slogan, "With great power comes great responsibility." Unfortunately, Mindworm's story doesn't end great, since criminals manipulate him back to a life of crime, and he went back to prison, and afterwards he was killed by a group of people on the street. It's pretty depressing. Number 9, the Spot. So before he became the Spot, he was known as a guy named Jonathan, a scientist who was working for none other than Kingpin. Yes, so you know he has to be pretty evil working for a guy like Kingpin. Anyways, Kingpin wanted Jonathan to figure out a way to replicate Cloak's powers. Not such an easy task, as Jonathan would soon find out. Instead, he opened up a portal that sent him into a spotted dimension. I wonder if that's where he got his name from. When he was inside that dimension, his skin changed to where he had black spots all over bleached white skin. These spots were all around his entire body and would allow him to teleport anything that he touches. He hated Spider-Man so much that he even formed a group with some of the people that will show up later on this list. Spoiler alert, one of them may be Grizzly or maybe Kangaroo. Maybe, but you'll have to keep watching to find out if that's true. But they were part of the Spider-Man Revenge Squad. Of course, it didn't really work out for him. Number 8, the Living Brain. So the Living Brain was created by the character Dr. Petty, and is basically an artificial intelligence robot machine. There was nothing that the Living Brain couldn't solve. So when it was brought to a high school, it gave 2 people a pretty good idea of what they could do with this crazy robot. They had the idea to steal it and use it for whatever they would go out and gamble. They attempted to steal it, but Dr. Petty didn't want to lose his creation and fought them off and caused one of them to hit the Living Brain, damaging it and causing it to lose control of itself. It then turned on everyone and was on a mission to destroy, but luckily Spider-Man defeated it and saved the day. The Living Brain has appeared several times after this by, people either trying to use it to take down bullies or try to rob banks. The Living Brain was even part of the Sinister Six at one point. Number 7, Swarm. This is definitely a weird one. So are a lot of these ones on this list. So the Swarm was a Nazi scientist who survived World War II and was really into bees and poisons. He really wanted to try to make the bees he was finding very villainous and use them to his advantage. He discovered a beehive, and since he was trying to make them change their behavior, he was successful at doing that. But that is what ended up getting him killed by the bees and allowed the bees to use his consciousness and what was left of his body to become the Swarm. He has the abilities to fly and even turn as big or as small as he likes. He can also manipulate himself into different shapes. This makes it very hard for Spider-Man to fight him, since really he's just a swarm of bees. He also could control not only bees, but any type of insect. Number 6, LeapFrog. So LeapFrog, aka Vincent Patillo, loved to invent an assortment of just random items. He always wanted more though after every invention, and he was never really satisfied. That is, until he developed this invention so that he would be able to leap several stories in the air. He used this invention and created a suit to become the LeapFrog. This is how he began to get into the criminal world, but he didn't have the greatest success there, and there's not a lot about him. Number 5, Plant Man. Samuel Smithers was obsessed with plants and even studied them throughout his jobs. He wanted to invent a device that allowed communication between plants and humans. He had been working on this ray gun that he thought could actually make it work and create this open line of communication. It was only when it was hit by lightning when it actually got the ability to control plants. He had superhuman strength and he has the ability to communicate and control plants. After he placed Captain America in a coma with his invention Pretty Poison, he got the attention of Spider-Man, who teamed up with the Falcon to take down Plant Man and get the cure for Captain America. Number 4, Grizzly. Maxwell Markham, aka Grizzly, is quite the strange supervillain. Basically, he looks like an actual grizzly bear in this mechanical suit. His story is that he used to be a wrestler until J. Jonah Jameson ruined his career with one article, which was the reason why he lost his license to be a pro wrestler. He wanted revenge on the man who ruined his career and later attacked the Daily Bugle. Spider-Man showed up and was able to take down Grizzly and sent him straight to prison. Grizzly had super strength, durability, and super sharp claws. Number 3, Kangaroo. Before Frank Oliver became the Kangaroo, he was just some guy who loved studying kangaroo back at his home in Australia. He used to be a boxer, but he got kicked out for how he fought and really hurt one of his other opponents. When he made his way over to America, he got quite into trouble and even caught the eye of Spider-Man, since Kangaroo had stolen an armored truck. But Spider-Man was able to apprehend him. Kangaroo later got surgery by Dr. Jonas Harrow, and this is what gave him his powers where he could actually leap like a kangaroo, but a lot higher and much further. Apparently, even before his surgery, he did have kind of some abilities where he could leap more so than the average human, but not to the extent of what the surgery gave him. Number 2, Big Wheel. Jackson Wheel, aka Big Wheel, got the Tinkerer to make him this big armored wheel that would, lead him to become the Big Wheel. This all started because Rocket Racer, someone he hired to find any dirt on himself, wanted more money for something extremely bad that he found on Wheel, something that would ruin his entire job in life. He found out about the Tinkerer from Rocket Racer, which led him to the creation of the armored wheel. He attacked Rocket Racer during a fight with Spider-Man. He almost killed Rocket Racer, but Spider-Man saved him, and then Big Wheel lost control, went into the river, and was later arrested and sent to prison. But don't worry, he was back to a life of crime shortly after that. They always do. Number 1, The Wall. Yes, there was a supervillain named The Wall that has gone up against Spider-Man in the past. And a little fun story, I remember hearing about this villain a few years ago from my friend who was going back and he was reading all of the original Amazing Spider-Man issues. I remember he sent me a picture while he was reading it, and I literally could not stop laughing because his slogan was, "This is one wall you will never crawl." I mean, it's weird, but at the same time, it's kind of amazing. Like, he's definitely one of the most weird and just strange supervillains that Spider-Man has ever gone up against. Okay, so a little backstory. Joshua Waldemeier, wow, had the job of laying bricks down, and one day, an explosion happened and hit a brick wall that had just been built, sending it crashing down and burying him under all of these bricks. But didn't kill him. And actually, the bricks merged with his body, which turned him into the wall. Since he was an actual wall, Spider-Man had a hard time affecting him with any and all physical attacks. Spider-Man's web attacks didn't even work on him. But they later found themselves sitting on a bench and just working things out like two grown adults. A grown man spider and a grown man wall.
And at number 10, the Spider Slayers. The Spider Slayers are robots that were created specifically to hunt down, capture, and kill Spider-Man. First appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 25 in 1965, there have been various iterations of them over the years, with the first being designed and built by Dr. Spencer Smythe, thanks to funding from J. Jonah Jameson. Smythe would be contaminated by radiation poisoning from creating the robots and tried to take revenge on Jameson and Spider-Man, only to die right before Spider-Man defeated him. Perhaps the more vicious versions of these robots, though, can be found in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, Earth 1610, where the Spider Slayers were created by the Tinkerer under Nick Fury's command in case Spider-Man ever went rogue. They're 8 feet tall, balance on a large sphere, have 2 arm cannons, and a sphere for their heads. Plus they managed to take down Carnage and kill a disfigured clone of Spider-Man's. Needless to say, they can be lethal. In at number 9, Alistair Smythe. Speaking of the Spider Slayers, our next number is actually a member of said group. Alistair Smythe, the son of Dr. Spencer Smythe, who inherited the legacy from his father, along with a hatred of Spider-Man. Initially he was wheelchair bound until he became the ultimate Spider Slayer and gained the ability to walk. So what's Alistair's deal? Well, he's a scientific genius who knows a thing or two about genetics, cybernetics, and robotics. He built his own version of the Spider Slayers, which were majorly advanced compared to his father's version, being more sophisticated and formidable. He became the ultimate Spider Slayer when he crafted a bioorganic carapace, which is a shell-like protective exoskeleton, like crustacean animals have. This fused with his spine, allowing him to walk, giving him bird-like talons for feet, and 2 curved blade-esque weapons jutting out from his shoulders, along with blades on each of his forearms. In addition to that, he also has a web shooter, and his armor gives him superhuman strength, speed, durability, and agility. That's a tough foe to beat. And at number 8, The Spot. The Spot first appeared in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 97 back in 1984. He's been an antagonist of both Spider-Man's and Daredevil's over the years, and originally worked as a scientist for another mutual threat of theirs, Kingpin. Dr. Jonathan Ahn was assigned by Wilson Fisk to reproduce the radiation levels of Cloak, a hero who can teleport himself over long distances and become intangible. When attempting to recreate his powers though, the Doctor created a circular black portal, which he then stepped into. He passed out and then awoke in a dimension that he believed to be the one that Cloak used as a gateway to teleport through. But when he returned to the real world, he had undergone a massive transformation, having portals to this other dimension adhered to his skin, giving him the black spots on his body. Now Spot can create portals that lead into an alternate dimension, which he calls Spot World, which allows him to theoretically travel unlimited distances. He can also use spots to avoid taking damage, opening a portal in which attacks pass through. His abilities are something that Spider-Man's spider sense is unable to detect, making Spot fairly deadly. And at 7, the Sinister Six. Okay, let's be real about this supervillain group for a sec. While leaving them out of the future of Spider-Man stories in the MCU might be a big mistake on Marvel Studios' part, there is no way that we'll be seeing the Sinister Six show up on the big screen anytime soon. For starters, not all of its members have been introduced into the MCU yet. Second, there is no way in hell that Peter Parker is ready to take on the combined efforts of foes that deadly. So while we do think that the Sinister Six is inevitable, we definitely think they're a long time coming as far as Spider-Man's films are concerned. And at number 6, Willow the Wisp. Willow the Wisp, aka Jackson Arvad, first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 167, and he's got a handful of abilities up his sleeve that would be hard for any superhero to tackle. He was a physicist who was able to gain control over the electromagnetic attraction between his body's molecules, which led to his powers. Now aside from being a scientific genius, he's capable of density control, similar to Vision, meaning he can make himself intangible if he wanted. He can fly at subsonic speeds, he's capable of hypnosis, and of course he's got superhuman strength, durability, and speed. He's come into contact with Spider-Man on multiple occasions, and once Civil War rolled around and Peter Parker's identity was revealed, he worked with Chameleon on a scheme in order to get revenge on the web-slinging hero. And at number 5, Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man is a character we'll likely never see in the MCU. Or rather, an iteration of the character who hasn't even come into the MCU yet. Now we're talking Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus. Now during the Dying Wish storyline back in 2012, Otto was terminally ill from his years of fighting crime, and set in motion a plan to continue his legacy. Now this plan involved swapping his consciousness with Peter Parker, planting Parker into his dying body and Otto into Peter's healthy web-slinging one. The plan was successful, Parker died, and Otto became Spider-Man, calling himself the Superior Spider-Man. As you can imagine, fans weren't really into that, and Parker eventually returned, but Otto to this day continues to fight on as the Superior Spider-Man in the second volume of his solo series. So what makes him superior, and a villain that is too strong for the MCU, aside for reasons that we've already mentioned? Well, for starters, he had taken over Peter's body. He had access to Peter's memories. He improved upon Spider-Man's costume, upgrading it a whole lot, and still has the genius level intellect and scientific mind of Otto. So yeah, overall, not a villain Peter Parker of the MCU would be overly eager to see come alive off the panels, I'm sure. In at 4, Red Goblin. While the Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn, is Spider-Man's arch-nemesis, and surely will enter the MCU one day, this version of Osborn combines the Green Goblin along with the enemy of another Parker rival. Red Goblin is the result of Norman Osborn bonding with the Carnage symbiote. The symbiote Venom birthed, who has an adoration of all things blood and violence, hence the name. Anywho, Carnage got mixed in with the Goblin formula, which made both of them stronger and purged them of their weaknesses. Eventually Osborn's youngest son, Normie, ended up getting infected too and becomes the Goblin Child. And at number 3, Jackal. For this number, we're specifically looking at Miles Warren as Jackal, because there's been multiple Jackals. First appearing in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 31 back in 1965, Warren wouldn't become the Jackal until almost 100 issues later. Miles had a grudge against Spider-Man, believing that he was responsible for Gwen Stacy's death. He was obsessed with Gwen Stacy despite their large age difference. Now after a failed stint as the High Evolutionary's assistant and a dead family because of one of his creations, and also a dead assistant of his that himself suffocated, Warren ends up successfully cloning humans. And begins to clone Peter Parker, of course. This carried into the highly controversial clone saga, with Jackal eventually managing to create clones of himself too. Now aside from his scientific genius, he ends up splicing his genes with the genes of a Jackal, which grants him superhuman strength, agility, and speed. All in all, a fellow who can stir up that much trouble is not someone to be taken lightly. From a master of clones to a master manipulator, in at number 2 we have Mephisto. Mephisto is a character who many deem as too powerful overall for the MCU, regardless of what heroes he takes on. And fun fact, he's actually quite present throughout the Infinity Gauntlet comic, but his lines from that comic were given to Ebony Maw in the Infinity War film. Anywho, Mephisto, who first appeared in 1968 in the Silver Surfer issue 3, has been a foe of many heroes in the Marvel Universe. He is a demonic immortal entity based off of the Mephisto of Faust's legend, who uses a variety of magic the likes of altering time, projecting illusions, shape and size shifting, regeneration, manipulating memories, and much more. He is known for acquiring souls but cannot subjugate the will of another being, hence why he's always making deals and pacts with superheroes that he wants, you know, to put in their place and to get things from. Blah. Peter Parker got tangled up with Mephisto in the One More Day story event, in which the demon offers to save the life of Aunt May if Spider-Man gives up his marriage to Mary Jane Parker. Mary Jane Watson, I guess, technically. But she's a Parker. They got married. Is a thing. He does. And Mephisto not only erases their marriage, but erases the little girl who would be their future daughter, after also appearing as that little girl. The storyline was highly criticized. Needless to say, Mephisto is incredibly powerful, incredibly manipulative, and a villain that would be difficult to place in the MCU in its current state. Speaking of difficult villains though, in at number 1, Knull. If you thought an immortal demon entity was a lot, how about a symbiote god? Knull is technically more of a Venom villain, but this nefarious being also fought against Spider-Man. Knull is a malevolent deity whose existence predates the universe, having prior just drifted through the endless abyss that existed before it. The Celestials created the universe, and that didn't bode well with Knull, who decapitated one of them in retaliation. He essentially is the creator of the Clintar, the symbiotes, having manifested a symbiotic suit of armor from the eldritch darkness he commanded, setting out on a mission to commit celestial genocide. Big goals. He's got a ridiculous amount of power, he's got divine physiology, he has the ability to create, control, and manipulate eldritch darkness, which is a manifestation of the Primordial void that existed before the universe. He can create symbiotes and dominate them via hive mind. He's also existed for over 12.7 billion years, so he's pretty old. He is self-sustaining, and he has a regenerative healing factor. So like, death is not a thing for this fellow. His one weakness though? The light, a metaphysical force that came into being with the Big Bang that spread throughout the abyss. Needless to say, don't know if Peter Parker could take him right now. Might be a little tough for him. Sorry, Tom Holland. I say that with love. And at number 10, Juggernaut. While Juggernaut may come to mind initially as an X-Men villain, he's actually got a long history with Spider-Man, having played a significant role in many of the web-slinger stories over the years as an antagonist. Spider-Man is actually one of Juggernaut's most common foes, especially when working with his ally Black Tom Cassidy, who orders Juggernaut to kidnap a potentially useful psychic character named Madame Web. Juggernaut ends up tearing up parts of New York City in the process, and manages to evade Spider-Man, but does not succeed in getting Madame Web. He accidentally removes her from her life support device and abandons her, leaving her for dead. Spider-Man then comes up with a way to defeat him by luring him into some setting concrete, with Juggernaut sinking into it. He eventually digs himself out a month later. So why is he too strong for the MCU currently? Well, technically speaking, he could find his way into the cinematic universe and be a fitting foe for the web-slinger. It's just the grander implications that Juggernaut's appearance would have. We're not going to see the likes of Juggernaut until mutants are gradually brought into the MCU now that Disney has the rights to use them. And surely when the mutants arrive in the MCU, our heroes are going to have bigger questions, even bigger than Juggernaut, that will need addressing. So regardless, there's going to be some solid wait time before we see this hulking baddie up on the big screen. And at number 9, Big Wheel. Big Wheel is an absolutely ridiculous villain who first appeared in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 182 back in 1978. But if you think about how Big Wheel, aka Jackson Wheel, would appear in a live-action adaptation, well, he could potentially be rather deadly. In the comics, Jackson drives a large metal wheel that's equipped with guns, Waldo arms, and the ability to climb buildings, all thanks to the Tinkerer. Essentially, if this thing took to rolling around the streets of New York City in an act of domestic terrorism, Jackson could easily have a whole lot of casualties on his hands before Spider-Man even got to the scene of his crimes. He's kind of a go big or go home sort of villain, if you didn't already get that from his supervillain shtick. In reality though, or rather in the comics, Big Wheel is a bit of a joke. Jackson was a businessman who embezzled money from his company, and hired another villain named Rocket Racer to steal the incriminating evidence against him, who then tried to blackmail Big Wheel with it. Big Wheel almost commits suicide because of it, and then chases Rocket Racer around the city until Spider-Man ends up intervening. 20 years later, Big Wheel would reappear, desperate to help Spider-Man in some sort of attempt for redemption, which just led to Spidey taking pity on him and letting him follow him around for the day. So in other words, if Big Wheel were to enter the MCU, he would definitely need some more threatening character traits in order to make him, well, you know, threatening. But he's got a foundation, that's something, right? And at number 8, Morlun. Moving into more serious territory with this one, in our next number we have Morlun. Morlun is a character from Loom World, also known as Earth 001. He goes around the multiverse hunting spider totems, and is the main villain in the Spider-Verse story event. In other words, he has taken on many different iterations of Spider-Man across the multiverse. meaning he's a bit of an expert when it comes to knowing his foes. Aside from that experience, he's got superhuman strength and durability, enhanced speed, agility, stamina, reflexes, has an extended longevity, and perhaps the most dangerous of his abilities, he can absorb life force via physical contact. He's also killed the 616 Spider-Man before in Spider-Man the Other story arc, although that was only temporary, like most deaths in comics. But he did manage to rip out one of Spider-Man's eyeballs, so, you know. Spider-Man, after his near-death experience, would end up in the hospital where Morlun would visit him and then break Mary Jane's arm, which somehow triggered Peter to jump into action with newfound powers, ripping out the villain's throat. Yeah, that's gruesome. Can't quite see sweet little Tom Holland pulling off that stunt just yet as Peter Parker, can you? I mean, maybe give him a few years of dealing with the multiverse drama and we'll see. And at number 7, Kaine. On our previous part 1 of this list, we mentioned Jackal, the Spidey villain who cloned the web slinger and brought about a whole lot of trouble and chaos. This time around, let's take a look at some of the clones he produced. Enter Kaine Parker, who would later take on the persona of the Scarlet Spider in 2011. Before his turn as a hero though, Kaine was previously a baddie, first appearing in Web of Spider-Man issue 119 back in 1994. He would play a huge role in the Clone Saga. A storyline, as previously noted, is not something that Peter Parker of the MCU would be able to handle right now. So what is he capable of? He shares a lot of the traits that Peter has. Superhuman strength, speed, stamina, agility, durability, reflexes, and equilibrium. He has a precognitive spider sense. He can stick to walls. All of these, thanks to his continued mutation as a clone, were stronger and more powerful than Spider-Man's own abilities though. He was also immune to the worldwide mind purging that erased Spider-Man's identity after it was revealed. He also bears something called the Mark of Kaine, a distinctive scarring he burns into people and surfaces after he defeats an enemy. Typically, he would break that enemy's neck and leave his mark on their face. It also lets him melt Spidey's webbing. Plus, if that wasn't bad enough, Kaine also takes a page out of Wolverine's book by having a retractable bone spike situated on the undersides of his forearms, that he refers to as the Sting of Kaine. Later, Kaine would gain more abilities under his Tarantula and Scarlet Spider personas too. Moving on to 6, Spidercide. Speaking of clones, and at this number we have another clone of Parker's made by Jackal, Spidercide. Get it? Like genocide, but spider? He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man issue 399 back in 1995, although he wouldn't call himself Spidercide until a few months later in New Warriors issue 61. Anywho, he firmly believed that he was the real Peter Parker, and became obsessed with convincing Mary Jane that he was such. He was literally created by Jackal to kill Peter, MJ, and another clone, Ben Reilly, and her last number, Kaine, and was programmed to be extremely violent. He also killed 2,600 innocent people in Springville, Pennsylvania after stealing a deadly virus and making it airborne. He would betray Jackal and later fall to his death off of the Daily Bugle building. Anywho, he's got a few powers that extend beyond the other clones that we've mentioned. He can do all of the stuff that Peter can do, but additionally he has control over his body on a molecular level, meaning he can do things like extend his limbs, shapeshift, change his appearance, control the density of his body tissues in order to make him more resistant to certain attacks. And has transformed his fists into various weapons. He even turned part of himself into liquid in order to simulate Spider-Man's webbing. That's intense. Up next at 5, Venom. Venom is one of Parker's most notorious and famous villains. First appearing as the symbiotic alien costume in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 252 back in 1984, Venom would bond with Peter and try to control his host, only for Peter to eventually get the help of Fantastic Four's Reed Richards to separate him from the symbiote. It would go on to bond with a character who also had a grudge with Peter, Eddie Brock, a journalist who believes Spider-Man had ruined his career. As the story goes, because Venom bonded with Peter, he's able to copy his abilities, and can shapeshift, create various weapons out of his body thanks to said shapeshifting, and is undetectable by Parker's spider sense. He's also immune to various other superpowers like Ghost Rider's penance stare. With the current state of the MCU, a character like Venom entering the fray isn't implausible. In fact, he very well could, but that would open up a whole new can of worms, so to speak, and the character, with the state Parker is in currently after the events of Avengers Endgame, would surely overpower him. And at 4, Carnage. Speaking of Venom, Carnage, the symbiote's offspring and antagonist, has been an antagonist of Spider-Man's on occasion. While the Sony Venom Maybe franchise plans on exploring Carnage and Cletus Cassidy in the upcoming Venom sequel, seeing Carnage in the MCU right now may be dabbling a little too deep into some really graphic and violent territory. Aside from his unhinged, unpredictable, and brutal tendencies, Carnage is stronger than Venom for one simple reason. All Clintar offspring, Clintar being the name of the symbiote species, are significantly stronger than the Clintar who birthed them. Hence why Venom and Spider-Man have teamed up to fight him in the past. It's Carnage's goal to kill both Spider-Man and Venom so he can be free to cause chaos, murdering whoever he pleases. But rest assured, Carnage can't exist without Venom, that is, if the MCU chose to follow his origins laid out in the comics, meaning until Eddie Brock makes his way into the cinematic universe, Carnage won't be popping up to screw with Spidey anytime soon. And at number 3, Arachne. Arachne is a spider deity, not to be confused with the second iteration of Arachne, aka Spider-Woman Julia Carpenter. This Arachne derives from the ancient Greek mythos of Arachne and the god Athena. She was a woman who claimed to be a better weaver than the god was, so Athena cursed her, turning her into a spider. Except in the comics, she's still partially human with the body and legs of a spider. It's kinda terrifying. Anywho, she fought Spider-Man when she was employed by Hera's Olympus group, which consisted of the Olympian pantheon's gods and deities. While not much is known about her, she is a literal god, so that definitely makes her a contender for a villain that's just too strong for the cinematic universe as we know it. And at number 2, Dr. Octopus. Putting Otto Octavius on our part 2 list is kinda cheating a bit. We featured a later iteration of the character on our past list, when Otto became the superior Spider-Man. While that version of the mad scientist is surely less likely to pop up in the MCU than the OG Doc Ock is, it would be criminal not to include one of Spidey's biggest foes on this list, especially considering that the MCU Peter Parker is definitely not ready to take on the likes of Doc Ock. Considering how much of a challenge the Vulture was, Otto is like a whole other step up from that. To be fair, Parker has grown a lot. He fought alongside the other Avengers against Thanos twice, and fared his own, thanks to some major help with that new and improved Spider-Man suit from Tony Stark that he got in Avengers Infinity War. But having a tricked out suit that helps you significantly on the battlefield can't protect Peter entirely. Otto is a genius and has outsmarted the web-slinger on several occasions beyond just switching bodies with the hero. His entrance in the MCU is surely going to be a lot for Peter to handle, even if the young hero really does step up in Far From Home. I'm sure we'll see Otto eventually though. And finally, in at number 1, Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn is yet another famous villain of Spidey's who, arguably at this point of time in the MCU, would surely outwit Peter Parker if he were to be introduced into the universe at this very moment. While there is no doubt in our mind that Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, will at some point be integrated into the MCU, there is no way that Peter Parker would be able to handle the criminal mastermind just yet. Sure, we'd bet that Peter could hold his own against the Green Goblin, but Osborn is so much more than that, as we've seen in the comics time and time again. Considering he's Peter's arch nemesis, there's definitely a reason Marvel Studios have been benching him in the Spidey stories to date. When he does arrive, and the Green Goblin begins to terrorize New York City, it'll surely be a conflict of epic proportions. Peter's got some growing to do to get there. But hey, maybe after Far From Home, Peter's growth and newfound responsibilities will place him in a prime position to take on his arch nemesis.
Number 10, White Rabbit. You might not think of Lorena Dodson as being a very dark villain. She's just a woman after all who's obsessed with Alice in Wonderland and basically turned to a life of crime because she was bored. Her greatest power is her wealth, which allows her the gadgets and goons she needs to be a supervillain and a criminal. However, during the Absolute Carnage tie-in, Symbiote Spider-Man, we get a little side story involving a man who once wore the symbiote suit unknowingly that also features Dodson. In it, she ends up aiming to scare the man who is actually a judge that condemns her in court after being a witness to her causing a public disturbance and assaulting civilians at a local burger joint. Her scare attempt, however, results in the death of the man's son, who goes into cardiac arrest. The whole story is pretty dark. Number 9, Morbius. Morbius isn't always a Spider-Man villain, but he did start out in the comics that way. Although he is more of a neutral figure inherently, his pseudoscientific vampirism and bloodthirst often put him in the villain category, and put him in conflict with none other than Spider-Man. Which I also kind of get, considering that the first time they met, like most old school comics, they had some miscommunication which led to a fight between Morbius, the Lizard, and Spider-Man. And during the fight, everyone seemed to miraculously discover they needed the other's blood to become cured from their ailment. And so the blood wars began, and the stealing and baiting of blood would become a common trope for the sometimes villain known as Morbius. He's like a blood bandit. He loves to steal that blood. Number 8, Tombstone. Some might think that Tombstone is some kind of zombie or Frankenstein's monster type villain just based on his look. While Lonnie Lincoln was later on mutated by exposure to a chemical, which granted him superhuman strength and durability, previous to this, he was actually just a crime boss with albinism. In fact, it was likely all the teasing that he suffered as a child due to his condition that likely encouraged him to become an indomitable criminal, filing down his teeth to appear more intimidating. His dark, grim, yet striking appearance is also a result of the time period in which he was introduced. Tombstone made his first appearance in the Web of Spider-Man series in 1988. He's definitely got a very 80s villain look. Number 7, Sauron. We've talked about the dark tragedy that is Morbius' existence, and now it's time to talk about another monster villain of Spider-Man's rogue gallery, Sauron. Carl Lycos was bit by pteranodons from the Savage Lands while on an expedition with his father. These bites would cause Carl to transform later on, causing him to need to drain the life energy of others in order to survive, basically turning him into an energy vampire. But from there, his story would only get more strange and tragic. While siphoning energy from a mutant, he underwent a further transformation, turning him into a hybrid creature, part pteranodon, part human. While Sauron was originally introduced as a villain during the X-Men comics, Spider-Man would face him during his time working alongside the mutants, both taking on Sauron and the team known as the Savage Mutates, and later fighting against Sauron with his own mutant class that he was currently leading and teaching. I love Spider-Man as a mutant teacher, I think it's super cute. Number 6. Kaine. Kaine Parker was the broken clone that Jackal brought into the world first, his first discarded attempt at cloning Peter Parker. He's also the epitome of 90s edge and darkness with his originally dark billowing locks and tattered cape. Although not specifically a Spider-Man villain anymore, when Kaine was originally introduced he was very much a misguided rogue. Kaine is also known for his fragile psyche and unique ability known as the Mark of Kaine. Many originally thought that this ability was Kaine emitting acid from his hands to burn his victims, but in reality he actually has a bunch of tiny hooks on his hands that allow him to climb, like many spider folk and actual spiders. He can use these hooks to dig into someone's flesh, making it look like he has left an acid burn when really he just dug a bunch of super tiny spider hooks into their face. Yay. Number 5. Kraven. For Kraven the Hunter, Spider-Man has always been the #1 prize. This was the inspiration for the story Kraven's Last Hunt, where it appeared that Kraven had finally captured and defeated Spider-Man by killing him. In truth, he had simply incapacitated Spider-Man, placing him in a comatose, death-like state for a few weeks. When Spider-Man awoke, he discovered that Kraven had basically been standing in for him while he was out, and it was revealed to Peter that Kraven's whole plan was to beat Spider-Man at his own game, proving that he himself was a better hero than the Spider by becoming sort of Spider-Man? In the end, Kraven felt he had accomplished what he had set out to do, and in a way also showed respect for Peter Parker's approach to heroism. Feeling that he was almost at peace with the world, Kraven took his own life, ending his legacy. Or at least this would have been a dark but meaningful end to his legacy, but instead of staying dead, Kraven would later be resurrected. Oh, comics. Number 4. Norman Osborn. Green Goblin, as he was originally known, has had a lot of different villain identities. Norman Osborn is often a criminal mastermind, and was the criminal mastermind behind the events of Dark Reign, when he was known as the leader of the Dark Avengers, Iron Patriot. He's also stepped in as a sort of alternate Carnage, believing he himself was in fact Cletus Cassidy, and has been known as the combination villain of Red Goblin as well, probably one of the most terrifying iterations we have seen of him yet as a villain. And he was also the Goblin King for a time. No relation to Madeline Pryor's Goblin Queen, by the way. But when it boils down to it, Norman Osborn is one of the darkest Spider-Man villains because he is so focused on going that extra mile just to find new and insanely twisted ways to torture Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Dude is crazy. I love it. Number 3. Kindred. This villain is pretty dark since it's been alluded to that they are a demon from hell. In life, they were someone close to Peter Parker who was betrayed by him and by Norman Osborn. They have returned to get vengeance and use demonic centipede creatures to manipulate others by having these summoned creatures crawl inside those that they wish to torment. Ick. But also not ick to house centipedes, which are lovely little creatures who feed on other house pests. We like house centipedes, but we do not like demon mind control centipedes. But we do not like demon mind control centipedes. Yes? Except MJ maybe is a fan, as she was actually pretty nice to Kindred centipedes prior to us really knowing that they were definitely a villain out to get revenge on Peter Parker, of course. Number 2. Carnage. Sure, Kindred is a former human and current demon from hell, but Carnage is like a demon on Earth. Even disregarding the dark attachment that the Carnage symbiote had to serial killer Cletus Cassidy, Carnage recently became an even more darker villain after the Carnage symbiote appeared to die attempting to preserve Cletus during his re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere. While attempting to protect its human host, the symbiote actually burned up, and even more tragic, depending on your perspective I guess, it failed to save Cletus, who also appeared to have died on arrival. However, the Knull worshipping cult known as the Church of Darkness managed to resurrect Cletus by bonding the Grendel symbiote to him, allowing them to become a new Carnage known as Dark Carnage. Cletus was intended to be the vessel that would allow Knull to awaken and return, but in order to do so he would have to collect codices from the spines of those who had previously bonded to a symbiote. I mean, dark is also in the name for this version of Carnage, but also this guy literally eats spines for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so yeah, pretty dark. Number 1. Mephisto. Of course, it can't possibly get more dark than Mephisto. When it comes to his feud with Spider-Man, or Spider-Folks for that matter, Mephisto seems to have a bit of an obsession. He saved Aunt May for Peter in exchange for his marriage to MJ, saved Miles Morales as Spider-Man's teammates in exchange for the life of a civilian that Miles had saved in that other timeline where his teammates died, and he convinced Otto Octavius as Superior Spider-Man to return to a life of villainy in order to defeat an alternate reality Spidey who was also that Earth's Norman Osborn. That's like getting rid of 2 Spider-Men with 1 stone. I like to imagine he keeps these little wins and trophies in a shrine that he has in his closet, because he is secretly the biggest Spider-Man fan ever. He even possessed Gwenpool's brother, and she's really only a small percentage related to the Spider-Verse as a sort of alternate version of Gwen Stacy mixed with Deadpool. Mephisto has revealed it's his dream to make life a living hell for all Spider-Folks everywhere. How nice. Add in the fact that he's basically Marvel's version of the devil, and you've got one twisted and dark Spider-Man villain. Possibly the most dark. Number 10. Sandman. Sandman has always had a kind of tragic story. He was a criminal who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and due to radioactive exposure was granted his sand shape-shifting abilities. He hasn't always been a villain, and sometimes strives to become a sort of hero, though he usually ends up becoming a criminal once more in the end, tragically. He even has been known to be a sometimes friend of the Fantastic Four's Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, and Spider-Man. One dark story involving Sandman took place during one of the many times he fought Spider-Man. Spider-Man usually had creative and sometimes twisted methods when it came to how he chose to defeat Sandman. He vacuumed Sandman up at one point, tossed him into a wind turbine, and he's even set him on fire. But Spider-Man also at one point exposed Sandman to an experimental chemical substance, which caused Sandman to become insane and also caused him to become severely dirty, as dust and garbage and debris became attracted to him and entangled within him. The worst part of this was when Sandman pleaded with Spider-Man to fix him as his mental state continued to worsen and deteriorate. And initially, Spider-Man was actually a jerk and refused to help. Pretty messed up. Number 9. Vermin. Vermin was a Spider-Man villain who really only became such because of previously being abused by others throughout his life. Edward Whalen as a young boy was severely mistreated by his father and ended up running away because of this. He then ran into Baron Zemo and Arnim Zola and became the victim of their experiments, which transformed him into a rat-like humanoid creature. They sent Vermin on a mission to eliminate their enemy, Captain America. This conflict eventually led him to be apprehended later on by both Captain America and Spider-Man, who ran into Vermin in New York City. Vermin would also become the prey of Kraven during his last hunt, and from there would end up becoming allies with Spider-Man actually. Number 8. Hammerhead. Hammerhead has a pretty dark origin story in comparison to some other villains. He and his family had left the Soviet Union when he was young, and he grew up claiming to be Italian instead of Russian, even preferring to speak Italian in his family's home. However, this would anger his father and would prompt him to beat his son with a hammer, scarring up the young boy's head. That's pretty messed up. In the end, Hammerhead managed to work his way into the Italian mob and would also end up beating Spider-Man in a fight. He was given both cybernetic enhancements, including a partial adamantium skeleton, and had his strength level increased by Mr. Negative. He also has been known to work with Black Cat when she is walking on the more villainous, criminal, and organized crime side of things. Hammerhead would also get revenge on his father, killing him with a large hammer. His origin could have possibly served to inspire the Daredevil Netflix series Origins for Wilson Fisk, who also killed his father with the hammer. Number 7. Mindworm. Mindworm might not have been a major Spider-Man villain, but that doesn't mean that his story wasn't super dark and tragic. Mindworm was William Turner, a mutant with powerful psionic powers who was kinda like a mental energy vampire, not to be confused with Will Turner from Pirates of the Caribbean. William needed to feed on others' mental energy or he'd actually die. As a child, he accidentally killed his mother in front of his father, draining her mental energy completely. His father went into shock and died as a result of witnessing this. William would then be raised in an orphanage, studying passionately and known for his intelligence. As an adult, he fed off of his neighbor's mental energy, taking a little from each person in his area, but not enough to kill anyone. Unfortunately, Spider-Man was one of his neighbors and sensed what Mindworm was doing. Misunderstanding that William's psychic attack was for evil purposes, Spider-Man fought Mindworm and handed him over to the police. Later on, the two enemies would actually become friends. However, Mindworm would also later on once again relapse, becoming a criminal, as well as becoming severely mentally ill, in addition to being homeless. This all culminated into prompting Mindworm to give up when he was being attacked by a street gang and allow himself to be killed. So sad. Poor Mindworm. Number 6. Hobgoblin. There has been more than one Hobgoblin over the years, but many of them have proven to be quite dark villains. Roderick Kingsley as the Hobgoblin would be the one responsible for the creation or transformation of Peter Parker's friend and Betty Grant's husband, Ned Leeds, into another version of that villain. Ned Leeds was brainwashed by the Hobgoblin and convinced to commit criminal acts, even sometimes believing that he himself was actually Roderick Kingsley, the Hobgoblin, causing him to behave extremely villainously, adopting the Hobgoblin persona for himself. When Ned Leeds was murdered, it was because Kingsley had leaked the true identity of Hobgoblin as being Leeds, causing him to be targeted and killed by the Foreigner. Number 5. Morlun. Even when Morlun is not threatening the entire existence of all of the spider totems in massive stories like Spider-Verse or Spider-Geddon, he's still pretty terrifying. Despite looking like a gothic vampire wannabe, Morlun is actually one of the Inheritors, a family of energy vampires who feed off of totems throughout the multiverse. In the story The Other, he also tormented Peter mercilessly, almost killing him at one point, beating him to death, and eating one of his eyeballs. Ew. Number 4. Kingpin. Despite the fact that Kingpin isn't one of the first people you think of when you think of dark and menacing Spider-Man villains, he's been around since the early days of Spider-Man's adventures, appearing in Spider-Man comics in the 1960s alongside many of Spider-Man's other classic villains. Wilson Fisk has always been one of the darkest, most menacing villains because of the amount of power and control that he wields. In the film Into the Spider-Verse, we saw respect paid to this character in terms of how great of a Spider-Man villain he truly is when he became the big bad of the film that Miles and his team of spider folks went up against. He was also the one responsible for killing the Peter Parker from Miles' own reality. And in the comics, he also almost killed Spider-Man's Aunt May after learning of Spider-Man's secret identity and choosing to target those Peter loved during the events of the Back in Black story. Number 3. Lizard. Lizard is one of the darkest villains on Spider-Man's roster because of how tragic his origins are. Kirk Connors basically is a victim in a monster horror story, a sort of werewolf-like scenario, but as a lizard instead of a wolf. Dr. Connors simply sought to explore the science behind possible limb regeneration, and it was his studies and exposure to an experimental serum that caused him to transform into the villain known as the Lizard. He is often presented as a villain who has no choice but to give in to his animal instincts, which is what makes him so villainous, while Connors himself really has no intention to harm others. The monster within him, however, the Lizard, often does. At one point, he transforms back into the villain known as the Lizard during a story called Shed and is tragically consumed by his animal instincts completely, which causes him to eat his own son. It doesn't get much darker than that. Number 2. Scorpion. Originally, Matt Gargan was just a private investigator hired by Jameson to uncover the secret of how exactly Peter Parker was able to get the best pictures of Spider-Man. He was later coerced into participating in an experiment wherein he was combined with the traits of a scorpion. This gave Gargan superpowers but also drove him insane, transforming him into a criminal and a villain. During Dark Reign, Matt Gargan would become Norman Osborn's Spider-Man on his Dark Avengers team, bonding with the Venom symbiote, and becoming one of the most vicious iterations of Venom to date when bonded with it. In fact, anytime Scorpion and the Venom symbiote have merged in the comics, they become a deadly villain, often going on a murderous rampage, shamelessly consuming their victims, and becoming an almost uncontrollable level of deadly. If you thought Eddie Brock's Venom was scary, no. Scorpion as Venom is scary. Number 1. Jackal. Jackal, of course, is one of the darkest Spider-Man supervillains around. He was Gwen Stacy's teacher, Professor Warren, but became obsessed with Gwen and fell in love with her. When Gwen died during the battle between Green Goblin and Spider-Man, the professor blamed Spider-Man and decided he would create a clone of her and Peter Parker after learning of Spider-Man's true identity. He was the villain behind the events of Clone Saga, creating more than one clone of Peter and of Gwen Stacy. And if you thought the Scorpion was scary, Jackal was also a villain who teamed up with Scorpion and even sent him to kill Spider-Man at one point. He also kidnapped and threatened the life of people Parker cared for, such as his good friend Ned Leeds. Number 10. Stunner. Angelina is one we all forget. She was for a time the devoted and loyal ally and girlfriend to Otto Octavius, who used his smarts to create virtual reality tech that allowed Angelina to live through a virtual form, an avatar who is stronger and that Angelina considered was more attractive in comparison to her true biological form. She got knocked into a coma for years following an explosion, and when she awoke years later she learned that Otto had died, though really Otto had moved his consciousness into Peter's body, becoming Superior Spider-Man. She swore revenge on Spider-Man, not knowing this, and once again took her virtual form of Stunner. Sadly, she was later defeated when her tech was disabled, and Superior Spider-Man created a virtual version of Otto to break up with Angelina. Number 9. Chameleon. One of the Spider-Man villains who I think deserves more recognition is the Chameleon. He's not only a great and powerful Spider-Man villain, but is also one of the oldest ones around, making his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 1. He's been here since the beginning, baby! Dmitry Smirdyakov is also related to another powerful Spider-Man villain, Kraven the Hunter. Chameleon is in fact Kraven's half-brother. Where Kraven brings strength and hunting prowess to the table as a villain, Dmitry brings intrigue, his intellect, and originally his technology, which was responsible for him being able to transform so perfectly into any person he wished to impersonate. Later on, however, this power was later changed to instead be a power granted through an experimental treatment. He's also been known to slowly kill his victims in an acid bath, and it is their cries for help that helps him to perfect his mimicry of their voice. Number 8. Sandman. One of the most powerful villains around, especially as he can turn into and manipulate sand, just as long as there are no vacuums around for him to get trapped in, which is a thing that has happened in the comics before. Seriously, you can check it out in the original run of The Amazing Spider-Man in issue number 4. Though thankfully years later that was retconned to be a choice and not a weakness of Sandman's. So in reality, no, vacuums aren't that dangerous to the villain, who can not only reduce himself to tiny and deadly particles of sand which he can control, but who can also harden himself to be as tough as a very thick and solid rock face. Sometimes I just think, listen to what you're saying, Amanda. When you wrote that, people are definitely gonna be like, would you just say he can harden himself? But I mean his body, his form, okay? Get your minds out of the gutter. Sandman is powerful because of all he can accomplish in his sandy form, and all he can withstand. He's also played not only the part of a powerful villain and member of the Sinister Six, but has also been a powerful ally to Spider-Man at times as well. Number 7. Kingpin. When it comes to strength and influence, Kingpin is one of the best out there. I mean, or should I say the worst. He's one of the worst. When you think Kingpin, you might think of Daredevil when it comes to his greatest enemy, but although Spider-Man might not be his number 1, Kingpin has still been terrorizing the webhead in addition to Matt Murdock since the Silver Age. In fact, Kingpin made his very first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man comic issue number 50 in 1967. How about that? Kingpin is not only physically strong, but is also known for being a criminal mastermind with enough influence that even locking him up can't stop him. He's just got that much clout and that many connections. Number 6. Rhino. One of the Spider-Man villains that we often forget but who is exceedingly strong is Rhino, Alexei Saitsevic. He himself is a hard hitter in Marvel Strike Force though, so if you are working on that Sinister Six build, then he might be one of the first to come to your mind when we talk about powerful Spider-Man villains. Rhino got his powers from exposure to a combination of gamma radiation and chemicals. This granted him super strength, and while he's often depicted as being not quite one of the brightest of all the villains, he still packs quite the punch with or without his Rhino armor. I gotta say though, when I think of Rhino, I still think of him first as a guy who looks like he's running around the city in a Rhino onesie, like in the 60s Spider-Man cartoon. Number 5. Carnage. I was actually tempted to put Carnage even higher on this list because he's just so powerful. Cletus Cassidy might be deadly not deadly, dead inside, literally. Cletus Cassidy might be dead inside, but he still managed to live on throughout the absolute Carnage story arc and become reinvented as an even more terrifying villain once bonded to the Grendel symbiote, becoming not just Carnage, but Dark Carnage. And yeah, he was ultimately defeated, but hey, what a ride it was. Carnage not only terrorized Venom, aka Eddie Brock, and his son Dylan, but he also managed to kick the butt of both Spider-Men, both Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Let's also not forget that when Carnage first appeared, raining down destruction and chaos in the comics, Spider-Man also needed to team up with Venom to even stand a chance against the villain. Number 4. Norman Osborn. While Norman Osborn might not be the most physically powerful of all Spider-Man's opponents, he is definitely one of the most powerful in terms of influence and genius. One of the most influential villains of all time for sure. Norman Osborn has definitely caused Peter and many adjacent loved ones and allies the most grief and pain over time. Norman is also so powerful that he moved from being solely a Spider-Man villain to an Avengers villain and really kind of an all-heroes villain during the Dark Reign storyline, which is pretty impressive. Number 3. Morlun and the Inheritors. Now I know some people are not going to like me putting Morlun this high on the list because I know there are some out there who detest both him and the Inheritors, but I truly believe that he deserves this spot along with his family of alternate dimension Victorian energy vampires. Yeah, I said it. They're kinda weird, but so what? I personally think that that's always been part of the charm of both Spider-Man and Batman's rogues galleries, and what makes them both superheroes who have some of the best villains out there. They got a lot of weird villains, Morlun notwithstanding. Morlun is an energy vampire who, along with his family, not only threatened the life of Peter Parker, but just about every other Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, and any other spider folks out there. He also showed up in the Spider-Man story The Other and proved not just how deadly he was, but how cruel he was as well, which in terms of ranking powerful Spider-Man villains should earn him bonus points, as those two seem to go hand in hand. Cruelty usually comes with power in these stories. Number 2. Knull. Knull is coming, and he's not just coming for Venom, he's coming for everyone this time around. Still, originally Knull was a cosmic god and villain intrinsically tied to Venom in the comics, and he was asleep, so he was a villain who not everyone had to worry about, cause you know, he was snoring. But Knull being a Venom villain means that he is therefore part of the Spideyverse in comics, as Venom comes from Spider-Man comics originally. All in all, Spider-Man's world just keeps growing and expanding every year, especially as more and more are getting that additional symbiote fever. Knull is known as the first god of the Abyss, the god of darkness and symbiotes. He is the creator of symbiotes, and we've watched here and there as now that he is awake, he's racing across the galaxy, raising planets and bringing darkness wherever he goes. He's heading for Earth, and he's likely going to end up being one of the greatest threats Spider-Man, Venom, and all of our Marvel heroes have ever faced. Number 1. Mephisto. Mephisto is one of the most epic Spider-Man villains and is definitely one of the most powerful ones around. Mephisto is a universal constant and has the power to do things like alter history. He saved Miles' friends in exchange for one life that Miles had previously saved. He saved Aunt May in exchange for erasing Peter's marriage from existence. He basically is this all-powerful being that, for almost no conceivable reason, is just super obsessed with spider folks. I swear, I think he just actually wants to be their best friends, but he just doesn't know how because he's like super awkward, so instead he bullies and torments these heroes. Mephisto likely just needs more hugs, but he's still one of the most powerful villains around.